Sharing with you in this video 5 ways to detach from your ego and create what you want, because the truth is that I really believe in order to create what you want, detaching from your ego, and I'm going to share with you what I mean by that in this video, is going to be absolutely essential. I think that in order to live a life where you're actually happy, where you're aligned with your passion and your true heart's desire and what you actually want to see happen in your life, detaching from your ego is going to be the bare minimum that you need to start with in order to really see what you want to see happen. And I'm not going to be here to tell you what you need to value in your life. I'm not going to say that here are the values you need to value, and then if you don't value these things, you're wrong or you're a bad person. But I'm going to make an invitation in this video for you to value something that's going to bring you not only closer to what I believe you want, but to make it so that you can come from a place that's actually aligned with, again, I shouldn't say what your heart actually wants because it's up to you, but what I believe to some degree a lot of people want. They're not just willing to admit it to themselves, or they've simply forgotten what they truly care about, but they're giving away their power to an idea that they think they care about something when really the truth is that they care about something else. So the first thing that I want to share with you in this video in terms of what I mean by all of that is, truthfully, the first way to detach from your ego and create what you want is, number one, disidentification with the mind. That's first and foremost. First and foremost, disidentification with the mind. Now, what does this mean? It essentially means is that you're going to be walking through life and you're not going to be attached to the stream of thinking that pops up in the mind. So there's going to be all these thoughts popping up in your experience, whether intentional, not intentional, sometimes going to be more intentional than other times, right? But the truth is that the key is to not attach to these thoughts, to not be identified with these thoughts. And that's the first way to detach from your ego, to create what you want. Because truthfully, if you've ever read a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, what you'll find is that in that book, what he explains is a concept where he calls the ego, essentially all the ego really is identification and attachment to the mind. So if we're walking through life and we have attachment and we're attached to the mind, and we're attached to this thing that Eckhart Tolle calls the ego construct, what happens is that if you want to have more creating capacity to create what you want, to really be the person that you want to be, what I might encourage you to do is to have disidentification from the mind. So live from a space of non-attachment to your mind. You can still use your mind as a tool. The mind is a powerful tool. There's nothing wrong with using the mind. But the truth is that you just need to disidentify from it, not be attached to it, and not believe that you need to be attached to your mind in order to, be successful, or to attach to your mind in order to be happy. Because the truth is that if you've ever noticed, if you're honest with yourself, every single time you attach to your mind, you're not happy. You're not miserable. So maybe Eckhart Tolle is right in the sense that if you've ever looked back at your life, anytime you've ever been miserable, happy, or what you might call quote unquote depressed, or in a negative situation, usually what happens is that it wasn't really the emotion or the situation. It was always the attachment to the situation, right? It was always the attachment and the identification with the mind. When you attach to the mind, what happens is that you become a very miserable person for yourself and for the people around you as well. You start to become a miserable person for other people and for yourself. And so how do you avoid all of this? You disidentify from the mind. You see that the mind, again, is just nothing more than thoughts popping up in your experience. And there's no reason for you, as the awareness, the I before the I am, to attach to the thoughts. There's no reason. There's really no reason. You don't need to attach to the thoughts. So the second thing that I want to share with you in this video is just to remember that, there's nothing wrong with the ego. That's just what I want to make very clear, is that there's nothing wrong with the ego. What's wrong, in my opinion, is the attachment to it. The attachment to the ego is wrong. Not that there's anything essentially wrong, but if we're going to talk about some type of good or bad or right and wrong or correct and incorrect, just remember that, typically speaking, if you look at a person's behavior, I'm willing to bet that if a person is going to show up with negativity and they want to lie, cheat, and steal and be negative towards others and be a resentful human being, that, not there's anything wrong with resentment, but if they're going to attach to the resentment, because resentment could be valid. You might be resentful at somebody for a valid reason, but I'm not saying to attach to the emotion, because attachment to the emotion is going to lead to suffering, is going to lead to pain, is going to lead to misery. Attachment to the emotion and the thought, that's what we call the ego. So, but there's nothing wrong with the ego in terms of the identity of, you creating stuff. When we talk about that definition of the ego, that's what I mean when the ego is not bad. So when I say the ego is not bad, what I mean is some people think the ego is just creating stuff, using your mind, and using your mind as a tool to create stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with creating stuff, thinking thoughts, being a person that's creating things in the world. There's nothing wrong with any of this. The problem is that when we walk through life and we're attached to our thoughts and we're attached to our creations, that's what actually blocks the creations in of itself. If you want to create more of what you want, try to not be so attached to the way that you're creating. Sounds ironic, right? It's like you would think like, oh, I need to be attached and put everything and put all my focus into it and be super attached to create it. No, you can put in consistent focus. Excuse me. You can be consistent every single day. You can be incredibly focused on what you want. But just remember that ultimately speaking, there's nothing wrong with what you want. It's just that the place that you come from, I think, should be coming from a place of connection to who you really are. Connection to that place where you don't need to be judging yourself or feeling guilty or shameful for wanting anything. Because why would you walk through life feeling guilty and shameful for wanting what you want? I think that's a recipe for misery and suffering. Now, the third thing that I want to share with you in this video is just remember that being miserable does not help the world. And I know I just jumped straight into that point randomly, but just remember that if you want to walk through life and you want to be the person that you actually want to be, where you're of service to others, where you're helping others to be their best version, just remember this point here. Just really be honest with yourself. If you're ever miserable, has it ever been useful to the world? Has it ever been useful to be negative and miserable and suffer and be a person where you feel like you're not even happy? Has that ever been useful? Has it ever been useful to be negative and suffering and be attached? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with feeling negative emotion. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, negative emotion is bad and you shouldn't feel it. And if you're feeling negative emotion, you need to judge yourself and get into some positive state. Look, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, if you're attached to being miserable and you believe you always have to be right and you're never interested in letting go of your ego, letting your guard down just to be open enough to have an incorrect opinion, what's happening is that you're not being open-minded enough and you just want to be miserable. Because remember, differences in ideas are fine. You can disagree with people. Excuse me. You can walk through life and you can truly disagree with other people, but it doesn't mean that you need to walk through life and you need to fight them or lie to them or cheat on them in some particular way. There's nothing you need to do any of these type of actions for, because if you come from a place of truth, if you come from a place of integrity and consciousness and align with your true values and who you actually want to be in the world, you're going to realize that you being in a miserable state doesn't help anybody in any type of way. There's no benefit to you being miserable. So the best thing that you can do for humanity is take back your peace and take back you being the person that you actually want to be. The best thing that you can do for the world is be who you really want to be in your life. The best thing that you can do for the world is actually be aligned with your vision and your true values and what makes you feel happy in your life and feel empowered and feeling like you're in control of your life and you feeling good. Because if you're doing things for other people all the time where you feel like you're suffering and you're sacrificing your values, your morals, and your state of peace for somebody else, what's happening is that you're now not living a life that's authentically aligned with who you want to actually be. You're really living a life for somebody else. You're living a life for somebody else's vision. Now, the fourth thing that I want to share with you in this video is just remember that, non-attachment to the ego, non-attachment to the ego construct, and with the ego really, once again, it's just attachment to thoughts. Identification, believing your identity is this thought. No, your thoughts are not your identity. It's just a thought that, you're playing for some time. Life is just an act. The word action actually has act in it. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed that the word action has act in it? Because life is just an act. And Shakespeare said it himself, that life is just a play and we're all just actors in it. And so if you're all just acting to take action towards something, why would you attach to this? Because it's all just a play. Life is one big cosmic joke. Let's be honest. Everything is a cosmic joke. Truthfully, if you want to be serious, that's fine. Be serious. There's times and places to be serious and to be more, stern and to have that serious type of energy. But just remember that all of it, why would you lose your connection to the formless part of who you are and the true essence of your being while you play all of that? Because the truth is that non-attachment to that identity is you're going to step away from what we call the ego, and then you're going to start to realize that assists creativity. So that's the fourth point in this video, is that if you want to be more creative in your life, if you want to actually tap into deeper levels of intelligence and deeper levels of creativity, what you want to do is have complete detachment from your ego. And by ego, what I mean is detachment from your thoughts and disidentify from your thoughts. Realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not the I am that you choose for yourself. You are the I before the I am. Identify, quote unquote, with that. But that's not identification. That's a realization of the I before the I am. That's not a thing. That's a realization of what is. So if you realize what is, from that place, what's happening is that that's going to be the energy that you need to be in the potential, the space of infinite potentials to have that creativity. Why is it that you have the best ideas when you're showering, in the shower, and you're not doing anything of importance? Because from that space, that's how you're going to actually be a person that receives powerful insights, because you're accidentally tapping into that essence of who you are, where you're realizing that I before the I am is giving you that creative energy to think of these new thoughts. That's all it really is. That's all it comes down to. So the truth is that what you want to start to do is just remember that, don't attach to the ego, and then notice how your creativity gets boosted as you go through your life. Notice how if you want to have the highest levels of creativity, the highest levels of productivity, the highest levels of being the best version of you, don't attach to your thoughts, and realize that your thoughts are not who you are, and that you don't own your thoughts, you don't own your desires, none of them are you. You don't own your thoughts, you don't own your desires, you don't own even your house if you have it paid off. I'm sorry to tell you, there's nothing you own, because everything is just a passing by in your consciousness, truly, at the end of the day. If you're honest with yourself, when you were born, and you became conscious at around 5 years old, 4 years old, right? Now maybe you're 20, 25, 15, whatever, 30, 40, 50, 60, right? But what is the one thing that has never changed since the first time you became conscious at around 5, 6 years old? Because many things have changed, right? Even science proves that every 7 years, every single body in your, every single cell in your body is completely different, right? So all the DNA in your body has changed since who you've been 7 years ago. So if that's the case, well, all these things have changed since you were 5. Your career has changed, your body has changed. Every 7 years, in fact, it changes. Science proves it, right? All these things have changed. If you compare yourself to who you were when you were 5, you're a completely new person, right? But through all of that, what has never changed is the I before the I am. That sense of you existed since the dawn of time, since the very first time you realized you existed. Now, since the day you realized you existed, that sense of I exist that's the only unchanging part of your experience, is that sense of I. It's a consciousness, right? So just remember that from this space, that's what creates more energy to create things in your life, to be more creative, to have creativity in your life. So that's the key to really step into who you want to be. You want to have the highest levels of creativity. Remember to come from a space of non-attachment and to be from your consciousness, not from your ego. From the awareness of the I before the I am, not your ego. Now, the fifth thing that I want to share with you in this video to conclude, the fifth way to detach from your ego to create what you want, is to remember that you really want to come from a space of more consciousness. And also, what I mean by consciousness is to have more spaciousness. And what I mean by spaciousness, what I really mean is more presence. And what I mean by more presence, what I really mean is more awareness. To me, these things are not necessarily the same. Technically, I wouldn't say they're synonymous, but they're deeply interconnected and deeply interlinked. Because spaciousness, well, what I mean by spaciousness is, you having spaciousness between you and your thoughts. Because if somebody wants to have higher levels of creativity to create what they want, you want to have more spaciousness between you and your thoughts. So if you want to have more power in the intention that you want to create, have more spaciousness between you and the intention, and then the I am that you're creating. That's a pure place to create something, right? Because if you're coming from a space of consciousness, now your intention is aligned with the divine itself, almost. If you want to see it like that, the divine consciousness is more aligned with your creation. And maybe you're just more aware of what's going to already happen anyway. That's another conversation for another time. Nonetheless, though, I believe that to create what you want, though, is going to come from a space of consciousness, from a space of awareness, where now you're valuing your state of consciousness more than anything, so you can have that spaciousness to not attach to your thoughts. Now, what I mean by presence is just being present at the moment, being here now, connecting to that part of you where you don't have to think to take action. You don't need to take any thinking, no thinking necessary to be in the flow of action, right? You could be thinking an intention that's going to lead you to action, but the actual action flow taking process, it has no thinking required whatsoever. It just is what it is. And awareness and consciousness, well, that just means you being as conscious as you can to the present moment. See, all these things are almost the same thing, but they're deeply, it's different in their own way, but they're deeply connected as well. What I really mean is, if you want to detach from your ego, what you need is more consciousness to be aware of the fact that you are not your thoughts. That's all it really means. And I think that from this place, it gives you more ability to focus on what you want versus what you don't want. What you don't want, you can see as a temporary passing of an emotion that you don't need to attach to. And then remember, this too shall pass. And then once that emotion passes, now from that contrasting experience, if you come from a place of true consciousness, true non-ego attachment, from a space of being connected to your soul and who you actually are, now you can calmly, and from a space of non-resistance, focus on what you do want. Take that situation of what you don't want as just simply fuel and more information to help you focus on what you do actually want in your life. That's the key right there. You see that negativity is inevitable? Why not use it as a reason to create more of what it is that you want in your life? Why not use it as a reason to be more of who it is that you want to be? Why not use any negative situations in your life as just a positive reinforcement to be more of who you want to be? Why not just do it like that? So remember that really negativity is just a reason for you to be more conscious. Your lack of creativity is really you a reason to be more conscious and present to the moment, to then allow that creativity to come through you naturally. Remember, motivation is a lie. Sometimes you have to take action in order to feel more motivated, to feel better. But I'm going to tell you right now that you're going to be more inclined to do that from a space of valuing your consciousness and your state before anything. If you want to be a person that takes massive action in your life, you want to be a person that values generating your state from within and then realizing that you find fun in taking action, not getting the results. To become a person that gets massive results in their life, I think that you want to become a person that takes massive, feels massive, a feeling where you feel like you're completely happy just by taking action. You feel massive peace and happiness through the action taking process, not by getting a particular result. That's what it means to be valuing your consciousness. So what I really mean here is to invite and encourage you to value spaciousness. Don't just value the result in the creation process, value the spaciousness in the place that you come from. And I am going to, really make a claim here that I believe that your creations are going to come from a much more pure place, allowing you to have more conscious power to create what you want. Again, not only from a much more pure place, but in a much more powerful way where you have now more capacity to actually create what you want because you're not so distracted by this heavy energy of feeling miserable and attached to your thoughts, believing that this is all, this limited sense of you attaching to one story that you played for the last 20 years is who you are. It's pretty tough to create a new future when you're attached to a belief of the past of who you used to be. So to remove that attachment to the